Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada today. Welcome to Pathways to Prosperity's 2026 virtual workshop series. For the next several months, on a Tuesday each month at 1 o'clock, we will hold a virtual workshop like the one today. Some of these will be led by the P2P standing committees. Others will be workshops focusing on additional current issues of wide interest. We hope you'll find all of these workshops informative and thought-provoking. Just before I turn things over to the moderator for today, Takmina Shukarova from Wilfrid Laurier University, I would like to acknowledge that I am today at Western University in London, Ontario, which is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, the Napawak, and Chinookan nations on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. I'd also like to recognize the 3 First Nation communities neighboring the City of London, which are Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. Please consider the lands on which you reside and the Indigenous nations whose traditional territory they may be. Thank you, and I now turn things over to Takmina.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are delighted to have you with us today for our workshop titled Working with Rohingya Newcomers, Global Displacement, Local Practice. My name is Tahmina Shakirova, and I will be moderating this session today. I'm also a member of the Standing Committee on Student and Junior Scholars Engagement with Pathway to Prosperity Canada. It's truly a pleasure to be part of this important conversation. In this workshop, we bring together both research and practice perspectives to better understand how to support Rohingya newcomers across their journeys, from displacement and life in refugee camps to settlement and integration in Canada. Our goal today is to create a space where we can reflect on lived experiences, identify key challenges, and think together about meaningful, responsive, and collaborative approaches to supporting Rohingya newcomers in our communities, while also exploring how these lessons can be applied to supporting other newcomer groups. We have 3 excellent presentations lined up for today. We will begin with Dr. Bree Akeson, who will speak about pre-arrival experiences and the challenges of prolonged displacement. Dr. Akeson is the Canada Research Chair in Global Adversity and Wellbeing and professor in the Faculty of Social Work at Wilfrid Laurier University. Her research focuses on families affected by armed conflict and forced displacement across multiple contexts, including Chechnya, Northern Uganda, Palestine, Syria, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. Our second presentation will be delivered by a collaborative team from London, Ontario, Dr. Mohammed Al-Ademi, Director of Newcomer Settlement Services at the South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre, Dr. Jason Brown, Professor of Applied Psychology at Western University, and Nadia Mehdizadeh Jafari and Amelia Hamilton, graduates of the Master's Program in Counseling Psychology at Western University, who conducted this research as a part of their thesis. This presentation will focus on the settlement needs and priorities identified by Rohingya newcomers, offering important insights grounded in community-based research and practice. And finally, we'll hear from Shukri Abdul, Team Lead of Case Management at Reception House, Waterloo Region, who brings extensive experience in the settlement and integration sector and has worked with many newcomers, including government-assisted refugees in the Waterloo region. Shukri will speak about the importance of partnerships beyond the settlement sector, highlighting how collaboration with non-settlement organizations is essential for building strong, sustainable community support and enabling successful long-term integration. At the end of all 3 presentations, these amazing speakers are going to be available to take your questions. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end. And we ask you please use the Zoom Q&A function, the chat function, which you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you can see it, click the More button and it should be one of the options. So you can type your questions through the session, and you can also upvote other people's questions to help us decide which are the most popular. And then after all three speakers have their talks, we'll answer those questions at the end. With that, let us begin. I would like to invite Dr. Bree Akeson to start with the first presentation.
Thank you, Takmina and Vicky, for inviting me here in Pathways to Prosperity. I'm really excited to get the chance to share some of my experience of working with Rohingya in Bangladesh, a country of displacement. I work mostly in displacement contexts, that kind of in-between space where families have found themselves to be in relative safety, but still facing a host of new challenges. And those challenges oftentimes carry with families when they arrive in places like Canada. It's really exciting also for me to present today because I love to connect what I'm doing as a researcher to practitioners and to policy makers, because I think that that's where the importance of this research is. It's not just an academic exercise. Of course, it's interesting to me, but I really want to make sure that the research that my team is doing has some sort of connection to making people's lives better. And I also want to just acknowledge how many people in the audience are from the Rohingya community themselves. And so I hope to learn from you. And if you have questions or want to engage with me further, please feel free to reach out. I just want to give a bit of context to the Rohingya situation, and where most of these families are coming from. So the Rohingya face generations of marginalization in Myanmar and persecution. A lot of my research participants have called it torture at the hands of the Myanmar government. In 2017, there was one of the largest flare-ups of violence against the Rohingya. And this was considered, the UN calling it a textbook case of ethnic cleansing and a genocide for the Rohingya people in the Rakhine state, which is along the western edge of Myanmar. This photograph actually shows these unidentified men who are carrying knives and slingshots walking past a burning home in a village called Gadu Thatya near Mangdao in Rakhine State. And the men were photographed by journalists who were there to witness what was going on. And whole villages were destroyed, homes, communities, many people killed as well. There was reports of sexual violence as well. You can see from this picture, this is a village of Ma in Myanmar in 2017. And this is before the ethnic cleansing campaign. You can see the village, trees, homes. And on the right side is after in 2018. And this really shows the scale of destruction that you can clearly see from this photo. So entire villages were erased, leaving only ashes where homes, mosques, schools, and communities and people's lives once stood for generations. You can see here from this map of Myanmar, which is the green part there, and then the orange, which is Rakhine State, which is where the majority of the Rohingya were living prior to their displacement. This violence led to a mass displacement of the Rohingya. Many families fled by sea to Indonesia and Malaysia, but the majority fled to Bangladesh, north of Rakhine, or kind of northwest of Rakhine State, as you can see from the green arrow. And they live on a small strip of land in southern Bangladesh, considered to be the world's largest stateless population. Families are living in a collection of camps throughout this strip of land in Bangladesh. You can see from the map here. This map is from July 2025 from UNHCR, and the number is actually over 1.2 million today of displaced people living in these camps. These camps are extremely overcrowded. They have extreme restrictions as well that affect daily life of every single person who lives in the camps. There's food insecurity, restricted mobility, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But what does this actually look like on the ground or from the air? This is an aerial shot of the camps. This is actually several years ago. This was 6 years ago, and the camps are even more crowded today. But you can see that the camps are the size of large cities, but they don't have any of the basic infrastructure that families would need to survive. The population density is less than 15 square meters per person, which is far below the minimum standard. It's about half of the minimum standard of what we expect in a humanitarian situation for people to live in dignity and in health. So you have 1.2 million people living in a space of 23.6 square kilometers. If I can put that in perspective for you, we have all been following what's been happening in Gaza. And if you compare it to Gaza, Gaza is 365 square kilometers, and there's over 2.1 million people in Gaza. And then you have 1.2 million in 23 square kilometers. So much more dense than Gaza, another big humanitarian emergency that we all know about. So what does this actually look like? These are some pictures that I've taken through I've been working in Bangladesh for about 2.5 years, and I've gone every 6 months to meet with families and do my research there. And this is what the camps look like. These are the homes that families are living in, extremely crowded, close to one another. The families are living in extreme poverty. Their homes are made of bamboo poles and tarpaulin plastic sheeting, which doesn't really protect families from the elements or from the weather. Here's another picture. But families are also continuing on with their lives. Parents are having more children. Children are playing on the streets. They're trying to find ways to survive. We all know that the impacts of living in war and displacement are vast. I know most of you are working with displaced refugee populations and resettlement. We're dealing with populations that have been exposed to violence. They're living in unfamiliar, inhospitable surroundings, oftentimes, especially in these in-between contexts of displacement. And there's disrupted social support systems. They're also lacking access to basic needs and struggling to meet the needs of all their family members. So there's very, very challenging situations for a lot of these families. For the Rohingya, I just want to give a few kind of general ideas about what these families are living in. So as I said, there's 1.2 million living in Bangladesh. And one of the biggest issues for families that we talk to is food insecurity, undernutrition, malnutrition as well. Families used to receive about $15 per person per month of a food ration prior to the dissolution of USAID last year. That food ration was cut in half last year, about 1 year ago. And this has caused a lot of stress for families. Families are barely surviving with the food ration that they have, and it's on the brink of, a food crisis, or I'd say it's already a food crisis. Another thing to note is that there is a ceiling on formal education imposed by the Bangladeshi government, where there's no formal education beyond grade 3. So that means children above 8 and 9 years old are not going to school, are not being educated. There is some informal education, there's some NGO schools, but the quality is a lot of people question that quality. There's also no right to formal employment. So you have parents who aren't able to support their families, aren't able to buy extra food for their children, aren't able to pay for school fees because there's no right to formal employment. Again, a lot of families are going around those restrictions and illegally working as which is a big challenge for the population. Adding to that is fluctuating violence. There's instances that we've recorded in our research of human trafficking, child abduction, sexual abuse, gang violence, and armed groups as well. We have 4 different projects that are going on in Bangladesh right now. One is on the perinatal experiences of families. Another is on climate change. And then the second and third one are on climate change and home. And then the third one is as a program evaluation. We have a really wonderful team of people that we're working with. These are researchers coming from Canada, the US, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, and most importantly, from the Rohingya community itself. 8 of our team members are based in Bangladesh itself, which is really important for us to do this kind of work. And we have a community partner, Hope Foundation for Women and Children, that's a major provider of services for the Rohingya, and we work really closely with them, and they're very well respected in the community. Today, I want to focus on just one of our projects, and I want to give you a little bit of a kind of some of our findings that we have from this research, some preliminary findings, because we've just finished data collection, and connect it to what you might be seeing on the ground here as practitioners working with the Rohingya in Canada. This research entailed focus group discussions with men, with women, with older girls, older boys, and then children. So we did community focus groups in that regard to talk about experiences with the environment and home and place. We also did collaborative family interviews where we met with the whole family, to hear their story of displacement, to hear the challenges that they're facing as a family. And then we also engaged young people, children, in something we call the Life Storyboard, which is a life storyboard activity to engage them in conversations about their everyday lives, as well as their hopes for the future. And then finally, we just got back in April from doing an additional follow-up with a lot of the families from this research, where we did a collaborative family portraiture activity, creating a family portrait that was co-constructed with a photographer from National Geographic, Haley Sadler, as well as the family, to create a portrait of their perceptions of home. So I'm going to talk about 5 findings, and again, connect those a bit to practice and policy here in Canada. Some of the images that I'm going to show are from this Rohingya Cultural Memory Center, and did want to note that because what's so interesting about this Rohingya Cultural Memory Center is that's situated right in the middle of the camps, and it's a center for the Rohingya culture, and it's funded by IOM, but it's under their mental health portfolio. And I find that to be very interesting because IOM sees culture as being such an important part of mental health and mental well-being for the Rohingya. And so I want to show some of the pictures from that cultural center in my presentation. So the first theme is this layered home loss across time and place. So families describe the loss that they've experienced not as like a single loss, loss of having to leave, forcibly displaced from Myanmar, but an accumulated displacement. So it began in Myanmar. It began with just how they were treated in Myanmar before the violence that forced them to leave. And it's renewed by this environmental instability in the camps, as well as loss of dignity, loss of access to social supports and things like that. So this layered loss is really important for these families, or really an important point that these families brought up to us in our research. And what does that look like for us here in Canada? I think that this means that we can treat arrival in Canada as another layer in that displacement trajectory. So our intake and early assessment should ask about that whole arc, that whole journey, and what that looked like for families. And also emphasizing the importance of the family stories. The families found telling that story can be very therapeutic. And so that is very important for families to know what they've gone through to get here to Canada. The other thing to mention is that most Rohingya have lived their entire lives as stateless. And so the legal recognition that they receive in Canada may be the first that they've ever held. And so helping families to understand that and ground that in something significant rather than being procedural, I think is very important. In terms of policy, advocating for settlement timelines that kind of create that trust and stability that families need in order to rebuild slowly after experiencing so many losses is very important. Another finding from our research that resonates here in Canada is the environmental conditions that they experienced. And I do want to mention this because it is really important to consider where these families are coming from. They've experienced flooding, heat waves, landslides, overcrowding, inadequate shelters that really shape their physical health, but also their mental health and their ability to maintain things like hygiene or religious practices or routines. I just want to show you really quickly some videos of the context here so you can see how crowded the setting is, and what these families have been living in, since they've been displaced from their homes in Myanmar. So you can see the tight living conditions, the litter and the poverty that these families are coming from. To give you another picture, the families were also living in very precarious environmental hazards, as you can see here, with the steep hillsides and their homes perched upon these very these hills that are prone to landslides and so forth. So what does that mean for practice and policy? I think we have to emphasize the quality and stability of housing placements for the Rohingya families who arrive here in Canada. Not just orientation to the Canadian climate, but also giving families a voice in their housing. In resettlement, the families can be given that choice, and it can be quite empowering for them, especially when they were living in a place where they did not have a choice. In terms of policy, advocating for housing standards and for seasonal and climate orientation to be built into settlement programming, which I know we do a lot of, but just to emphasize that again. A third finding is the gendered and intergenerational consequences of adversity. So women and girls and are really kind of bearing some distinct challenges from men and boys, limited mobility, interrupted or no education, reduced livelihood opportunities. And this is all tied to the environment that they're living in and structural and cultural conditions as well. What that looks like is considering gender sensitive programs that include women and girls, as well as fathers and boys. I think that's really important to consider. So considering girls' caregiving roles within families is really important, and thinking about parentification and adultification. But also thinking about fathers as well, since the disruption of the provider role is a known risk to family well-being, and thinking about gender responsive settlement services. The fourth theme is thinking about everyday practices that families engage in. So despite the severe hardships, families still have meals together. They still attend mosque, religious education for boys. Women gather with other women. Families tell stories to one another at night, which we heard about. And families are drawing upon this rich cultural and spiritual and relational resources that they've had in the camps, and they're carrying with them to Canada. So in terms of practice, we really want to emphasize this asset-based approach that lets families shape their own spaces and places. I'm sorry, spaces and paces. So the kind of the pace that families are working at as well. So families have arrived making home conditions in the camps, and that was really difficult. And so kind of how do families make that home for themselves here in their everyday practices? If women, for example, are connecting with other women in the camps, maybe that's something to think about in terms of informal women's gatherings as a way of practice intervention here in Canada. And if these things are already happening, hey, that's even better, because then it's a way that we can build upon things that are already organically happening in the communities. And then finally, my last theme is this idea of the future. Families hold hopes for resettlement, return, and improved camp conditions, yet these hopes are really tempered by their situation in the camps. Families have to keep that kind of sliver of hope in order to keep going, which they're carrying with them as well to Canada. So I think in terms of Canada, we really want to make sure that we're connecting families to what their vision of the future is: educational pathways, livelihood support, things like that, and advocating for this access in ways that make sense for families. So if you look at the statistics, you can get depressed. 1.2 million is a lot of people. But if you look at the people and you look at the individual stories and the families, you can find hope. And I think that that's something that's really important with this research. There's so many signs of hope in the camps. There's so many organizations and community groups that are working really hard to address the well-being of Rohingya families in the Bangladeshi camps. And we're also discovering that we don't need millions of dollars to do something significant. So even with the aid cuts that we've experienced last year in the camps, there are still so many ways that we can do things efficiently and building upon the capacity of the community. The research that I'm doing and my research group is doing shows how families are surviving despite all the odds. So despite these aid shortages, there's still a bustling Rohingya community that you can see in this picture. Children are hungry to learn and develop skills in school. One mother that we is part of our research is engaged in creative ways of earning an income to pay for her children's school fees by raising chickens, which she taught herself to do. And there's so many resources within the community. The Rohingya in Bangladesh and in Canada and refugees around the world are not only recipients of aid, but they're also teachers, they're health educators, they're translators, they're leaders. We have an amazing research team in Bangladesh a team who are poets, artists, journalists, and researchers who are sharing their stories to attract attention for their community. And I think that's something that we should really honor. And all of these people enrich the social and economic fabric of the Rohingya community, but also enrich the social fabric of Canada itself. So I just want to thank our team, especially our research assistants who are named here, and the families who've let us into their homes so we can share this, their stories.
I think there are some challenges with the internet. Bree, can you hear us?
I think move on to Mina. She was
Yeah.
finishing.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Bree. I hope you are able to join back. Thank you very much, Bree, for such an informative and interesting presentation and for sharing the research and the experiences of Rohingya communities living in the Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So our next presentation is from a collaborative team from London, Ontario. Mohammed, Jason.
Thanks. I'll start.
Yeah.
I'll start really briefly here and set us up. So what we're going to be talking about are settlement experiences of Rohingya men and women here in London, Ontario. And the research that we're going to describe here is based on a partnership with between the university and South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre. And really, it's based on shared values, but mostly it's possible because of the trust that Mohammed and his team have earned within the community. That makes it possible for people like me to come and talk to folks and students too who are going to be speaking about their work here in a minute. So I'll get you to flip to the next slide, please. And so for the next 15 minutes or so, what will happen is Mohammed will start off with an overview of the South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre and settlement services. And then I'll walk you through the research partnership between the university and the agency and a bit about the methodology. And after that, Nadia will come in and talk about key themes from her interviews with Rohingya women, and Amelia will follow with her findings from interviews with Rohingya men. So with that, I will stop, and Mohammed, please.
Great, thank you, Jason, for the introduction. And please, that was a lot of experience from outside Canada, the experience of the Rohingyas. But however, the small group that have arrived to Canada compared to the 1.3 million, it's really, it's just a small amount that we are working. The South London Neighbourhood Resource Centre is one of the largest community centres in London, having multiple programs and services from language classes to library, social services, and a number of other programs and services that are funded by IRCC and also other funders. So my focus will be mainly on the experience that we had as a settlement agency and how we were able to engage and resettle the Rohingya families that have arrived to London. So our experience started in the fiscal year 2023-24, where our organization became aware of the arrival of several Rohingya families through the schools. We have settlement workers in schools, so those the teachers and the administrators have approached the settlement workers in schools about individuals and students that they are not able to communicate properly with the administration. So one of our first initiative is to look for an interpreter, and we were lucky to get to engage a young Rohingya interpreter in our community, and we organized first an information session And with that, we were able to connect with 30 individuals who attended these sessions. And subsequently, also after the sessions, we were able to conduct a focus group and ask the families and those who are attended what are the main three priorities that they are interested to know. So after the focus group, we were able to identify three major areas related to housing. Families also learned about different costs of the rent and the system of housing, health-related issues, and also financial and well-being. So these are just the tip of the iceberg that we have seen. So we put together all our teams that provide the needs assessment, information orientation, the settlement workers in schools, the library, settlement workers, youth, as well as the informal language learning that we have. This is a large team of settlement workers who were involved in the process and trying to find out ways of putting together some of the uh, team dynamics that they can bring to the table. We had in the past an extensive experience in resettling other groups like the Yazidis, and we were successfully have implemented several programs and services in their settlement needs. While building those different activities in making sure that all our um, programs and services are put in line to meet the needs of the Rohingya families, tailored to their needs, the adults as well as the women and the youth. We try to welcome those families who are connected with the community center, and we were able to organize trips to different areas where they can enjoy a summer picnic or go to the sugar bush, just to give them the context of the new community that they are living in. These events provided, of course, opportunities where they were able to build relationship with one another, and they become more familiar with their new community. And subsequently, next slide, please. We came up with, after collecting so many needs of the families that we met, we focused on what we call the 360-degree support for the Rohingya families. What did we do that? We have seen that the most important part is they were having lots of questions with regard to housing, as I mentioned, health and finance, digital support, etc. So we made sure that the settlement counselors, or those who are working directly with clients, meet to make sure that each family, each individual, each youth is supported, based on the recognizing not just their needs, but also purposefully assessing their skills and assets that they brought with. We put together all this. As you see, it looks like complicated, but this is what we do on a daily basis in order to make sure that newcomers who arrive, who have experienced, pre-migration experience in refugee camps, etc., are well aware of the extent and the services that are available for them. It's a matter of making sure that they are able to connect to the proper settlement workers and be able to understand the system, whether they're interested in understanding the health care system or the school system or the housing. And all these things matter for the individuals, for their proper to reduce their anxiety and making sure that they are aware of their rights and responsibilities as members of the community. However, we did not also lose chance to put together experts in the field of mental health, or whether to provide also other activities that focus mainly on trauma and violence related issues, and those that have been identified by the psychotherapists and the uh, by the art therapists that they were engaged with. So I just put this chart to compare with the uh, pre-migration experience that the Rohingya had, and I'm saying I'm just really intrigued by the extent of the hardship that they had. But those that have come to London, from our experience, they were very resilient and smart, and they learned quickly. And we have seen that when we had the ability to provide digital support, uh, we have seen how fast learners they were, and they were eager to not just learn the basic digital support. They wanted to excel in higher levels, and we have seen some of them through the past 3 years have successfully completed their high schools and joined universities, um, and uh, and colleges, and so the having a welcoming atmosphere for newcomers who have endured so much really bring about more sense of belonging. We have seen that some of the youth, they were asking for a specific type of recreation that they are used. They said, we want to play a chill on game, for example. And luckily, the center has a gym, and they come frequently and play the chill on game. It's very interesting. And other youth also from other immigrant communities are joining them, and were able to how to make more friendships. So I'll not go in depth into all these areas that are involving this, but this is a kind of a roadmap that have, in our opinion, from our previous experience, and also the previous research that Jason and his students have done, have brought about a lot of evidence-based information that we were able to create programs and services that tailor to the individuals. And with that, I can uh, pass the time for Jason.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, so the partnership between Western and South London Resource Center is not a new one, and we were talking about it not so long ago, and Mohammed and I figured it was about 15 years or so that we've been working together. I'll ask you to flip to the next slide if you would, please. And so just put a timeline of some of the more recent pieces of research that students have been involved in. And so in I think it was 2017, yeah, that was Charlene's work. She was talking to Muslim immigrant youth in 2018. Jennifer was talking to Syrian refugees in 23. Charlotte was talking to Yazidi youth, and Amelia Nadia talked to the Rohingya men and women. This is a couple of years ago now, and Rita, who's probably in the audience, is right now as Mohammed's talking about the youth playing games in the gymnasium. She's trying to grab a few folks to talk to and do some interviews with, and that's the population for her thesis. It's ongoing right now. There are a few reasons. I think maybe the next slide, if you could. Yeah. So the reason I think it works pretty well is because we have a lot of history and experience together, but the center has incredible connections and relationships with people in the community to the point where the trust is so high that people are willing to talk to folks who, they probably wouldn't have any sort of comfort or interest in doing so, but do because of the trust that's there at the center and the safety that it provides. So we've had some wonderful staff who've, made all kinds of connections and made things possible. Organizing meet and greet events, helping with recruitment, and also helping with data interpretation. And the translator that Mohammed was talking about was also a huge part of the project that we're going to be talking about here because he was and is, I think, a bit of a mover and shaker in the community. So he was quite well connected and, of course, knows the language. So made it really quite possible for us to connect and do some interviews. So really briefly, these were qualitative interviews, and they're about 30 minutes each, and we did thematic analysis of those data. Amelia's study was with 8 men, average age of 39, and had been in Canada for about 14 months on average. 7 of those 8 were married with children, and 1 was employed at the time of interview. And Nadia, who we're going to hear from next, her women's study included 8 participants, also average age of 39 and 13 months on average in Canada. All were married or widowed and all had children. So, with that, I will pass it along to Nadia to talk about her results.
Thank you, Jason. If you could just go to the next slide. So I'll talk about the experiences of the Rohingya women. And to understand the experiences better, it's important to remember that, again, many of these women in the study arrived in Canada after years of displacement and life in refugee camps. So settlement was not just about starting over in a new country. It also involved rebuilding safety, stability, identity, and belonging. These women also faced unique challenges because of the intersection of gender, refugee status, language barriers, limited education opportunities, and past trauma. From my interviews with these women, 6 main themes emerged. The first and most repeated theme was language. All of these women described English as the biggest barrier to settlement. It affected daily life in many ways, like healthcare, employment, paperwork, and connecting with people outside of the Rohingya community. Many of these women also relied on family members, especially their children, to translate, which created feelings of dependence and isolation. The second theme that was emerged was financial needs. Participants were grateful for the support that government provided, but they also explained that it was temporary and often not enough, especially with the rising cost of rent and living. Many of these women wanted financial independence through work, but also recognized that language and skills training were needed first. Another theme was safety and freedom. Many of these participants described Canada as a place where they finally felt safe. They spoke about being able to move freely, practice their religion, and live without the fear that they experienced back in Myanmar and also in the refugee camps. At the same time, safety did not mean trauma disappeared. Some situations, like walking on the street and with loud noises or unexpected encounters with strangers, could still bring back painful memories for them. The fourth theme was community and social support. The Rohingya community helped women feel connected and supported, and it also helped them preserve their culture, religion, language, and traditions. However, still language barriers made it harder to build these relationships with people outside of their community. Another theme was emotional and psychological well-being. Women described grief, anxiety, distress, and uncertainty about the future. These experiences were connected to the past trauma that they experienced, separating from their loved ones, mostly their parents and extended family, and the challenges of starting over in a new country. This highlights the need for mental health services that are accessible, culturally sensitive, and trauma-informed. Finally, the final theme was access to services and resources. Women appreciated the settlement support they received, especially at the beginning. However, they also noted gaps in healthcare, transportation, childcare, and navigating systems. They also expressed the need for spaces where they could practice, teach, and preserve their cultural and religious values, especially for younger generations. If we could go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the quotes that were directly from the interviews. And to just summarize, before moving to the men's experiences, settlement for the Rohingya women was not only about housing or paperwork, it was also about language, safety, mental health, family roles, culture, and belonging. With that in mind, I'll now pass it over to Amelia, who will discuss the settlement experiences of Rohingya men.
Thank you, Nadia. If we can go to the next slide. The results of my interviews with Rohingya men revealed 8 themes. All men expressed a desire for employment, to provide support and stability to the family, also a sense of autonomy and to feel settled. However, they have struggled to find work and report a lack of job opportunities. Roles previously held by Rohingya men are not easily accessible to them in Canada. They found their skills were not transferable or require additional education, which was quite costly. In addition, there's an expensive government loan that requires repayment by each family, adding to the financial pressures. One big challenge, as Nadia mentioned, has been the language barrier, which has impacted their ability to settle, secure employment, connect with members of the community, access healthcare, and just navigate their new environment fully. And some participants were waiting on a wait list of up to 6 months for the language classes. Participants were really grateful to be able to access education for their children, as they'd been denied this right before arriving to Canada. However, they faced obstacles in accessing education, including a delay with the school board in registering for classes, high cost of post-secondary education, and also the slow pace of adult education classes, which impact their ability to secure employment with these skills. Previously acquired high school certificates were not recognized by the Canadian education system, requiring some youth to complete their education again. And then there's the youth who spent time in refugee camps who had long gaps in their education, resulting in them arriving with less education than Canadian youth of their age. Third was the settlement services and government support. All participants used settlement services and government support, which they were extremely grateful for. Language classes, caseworkers, social assistants, access to resource centers, and computer classes through settlement services were highly valued by participants, as were permanent residency, financial support, healthcare, social assistance, and freedom of movement offered by the Canadian government. Challenges included inconsistency in services provided by settlement workers, procedural obstacles such as temporary residency cards, which impacted service, and interpreter services only being offered for 12 months, even though they may not have acquired the sufficient language skills at that point. They did express how safe they feel in Canada, especially compared to their previous experiences back home or in refugee camps where they did not feel safe. One participant who was placed in a lower income area of the city expressed concerns about his safety and emphasized that he would feel a lot safer if he lived near the rest of the Rohingya. The men stated that they did not feel they had been discriminated against in Canada and reflected on how the authorities and police in Canada seemed trustworthy and friendly, which was very different than their experiences back home and in the refugee camps. Freedom of movement, permanent residency, and eventually citizenship were profoundly meaningful to men who lacked documentation up till this point in their lives. Housing, so the cost of rent and cultural differences in living arrangements were highlighted as obstacles. Culturally, families have more children and typically live in multi-generational homes with a high number of family members, which is really not well supported within the Canadian housing market. For community and sense of belonging, Canadian citizenship provided a sense of belonging to participants, and strong in-group ties were experienced as protective. Canadians were seen as welcoming and friendly, but language barriers limited broader Canadian connections. Men expressed feeling safer and more settled when near the Rohingya families. A deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for the city and for Canada was a theme that ran through all the interviews and felt palpable in the room. They expressed gratitude for government assistance, freedom, rights, and safety. And positive interactions with police and community events also reinforced their sense of belonging. On the next slide, we have some quotes on this screen. If you can flip to the next slide. They highlight the aspects of employment, education, and identity for Rohingya men. Instead of taking government assistance, men expressed a desire to learn skills quickly so that they can secure employment themselves. All men were actively job seeking but encountering obstacles and expressed that government assistance, while appreciated, was just not sufficient to provide for their families. And they described the educational journeys of their youth as being very long, including educational gaps in the camps, certificates not being recognized by our school board, and even missing out on opportunities to enter university due to missing credits. So while they had a really deep desire for education, the journey to actually getting education has been a very long one for many of the youth. Legal documentation was really meaningful for Rohingya men. Though Rohingya are indigenous to Myanmar, they have been experiencing statelessness since 1982, which means many men have never possessed identity documents. And the 1982 citizenship law denied Rohingya citizenship for failing to prove 160 years of its ancestral residency. So when they arrived here and were able to acquire permanent residency, this provided a profoundly meaningful sense of legal personhood and security. Next slide.
Okay, so thank you. I'll just go over some recommendations that are for improving settlement services that were influenced by the findings from men's and women's interviews. So first, language support needs to be more accessible and more tailored. This would include Rohingya-specific ESL classes and not the general ones, with shorter wait lists and more frequent classes, and language programs that also include employment readiness and everyday communication skills. Second, to them, housing support is very important, especially because many Rohingya families have larger households and face higher rent costs. Support with affordable housing near schools, transportation, essential services, and other Rohingya families would help improve settlement a lot. Next, support needs to be longer and more consistent. Families may still need help with interpreters, appointments, school systems, employment, and navigating services beyond the first year. Another key recommendation is improving access to trauma-informed and culturally sensitive mental health supports. Women-specific safe spaces and community-based mental health education could also help reduce stigma. Economic integration is also essential. This includes credential recognition, skills training, employment programs, and childcare during language or work-related programs so women can participate more easily. And finally, settlement services should continue working closely with Rohingya community leaders, local mosques, and trusted cultural interpreters. This would make programs more culturally appropriate and help build trust with the community. Overall, these recommendations focus on making settlement support more practical, long-term, and responsive to the real needs of Rohingya families. Off to you, Amelia.
Next slide, please. So our conclusions, despite significant barriers, the Rohingya newcomers in London expressed profound resilience and gratitude for Canada's protection and the opportunities here. Government policies do provide essential scaffolding, but critical gaps remain in translating the policies into actual lived benefit at the individual level, especially around language access, credential recognition, housing, and mental health. Protected factors were pretty clear. Government granted rights and legal status, strong Rohingya community bonds, and culturally responsive settlement services all foster a sense of belonging and settlement success. And this research demonstrates the value of university community partnerships and community embedded research models. Amplifying Rohingya voices is both an ethical imperative and a practical tool for improving services. And that's it for us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mohammed, Jason, Nadia, and Amelia, for sharing your practice experiences and research. Now we turn to Shukri. Please, Shukri.
Thank you. So I'm going to be presenting on behalf of our organization, Reception House Waterloo Region. We have different programs, but I'm going to be focusing on the case management program, which supports newcomers for 12 to 18 months. So next slide, please. Before we talk about partnerships, we wanted to acknowledge that our local context is somewhat unique. It has shaped the way we have approached long-term integration for Rohingya refugees. Our organization has been welcoming and supporting Rohingya families since 2007. This has given us nearly 2 decades of experience working alongside the community and understanding their settlement journeys. Over the years, we have witnessed remarkable long-term integration among the first generations of Rohingya families. Their children are now pursuing post-secondary education. Community members have established careers and businesses, and many have become leaders within the community. One of the strongest examples of this success is the Rohingya Center of Canada, which was founded by the members of the Rohingya community. The center has become a trusted source of interpretation, advocacy, cultural knowledge, and community navigation. This has significantly strengthened our community's ability to support newly arrived families and has become an invaluable resource for both the reception house and mainstream service providers. Today, Waterloo Region is home to what the Rohingya Center estimates to be the largest Rohingya community in Canada. The center believes that approximately 70% of Canada's Rohingya population lives in the region. We also continue to see increased secondary migration as families choose to relocate here to reunite with their relatives and access established community supports. Next slide, please. So in 2025, we knew that we'd be welcoming more Rohingya families, more than we had received in 2024. So we took the opportunity to do a post-exit evaluation. So some of the findings that Jason, Mohammed, and the team kind of talked about almost mirrored what we found as well. Clients talked about the same things and the same themes. So for us, we partnered with the Rohingya Center of Canada and the Center for Community-Based Research here in Waterloo. They conducted the post-exit evaluation for us. Overall, the findings were encouraging. On the client side, clients had successfully transitioned out of our program. They told us they felt more confident navigating daily life, more independent, and they had a greater sense of belonging and safety, especially for the women and children. At the same time, though, the evaluation also showed that clients were still relying on a relatively small network of organizations after they left our program, despite the fact that we had referred them to many different organizations and programs while they were with us. So they were mainly still accessing the Rohingya Center, especially the men, the Ontario Works Office, and the YMCA for ESL classes and employment services. Also, many barriers that clients faced were no longer settlement barriers. There were barriers that were inside the mainstream systems like healthcare, employment, and government services. So the same barriers the team just talked about, there was that lack of language support after they left our program because there was no organizational support that was providing them interpretation as they moved through the other systems. So these findings showed us that we needed to have stronger partnerships with organizations that continue to support clients long after our program ends. Next slide, please. So what role do partnerships play? I think for us, these are the 3 main areas we wanted to focus on. So first, partnerships extend support beyond settlement services, so beyond our timelines, because some of the barriers our families face, like language barriers, they cannot be addressed in the first 12 to 18 months they're there with us. So they will continue facing these barriers. So it's the systems that have to be responsive and flexible. So while our intensive case management eventually ends, clients continue to interact with healthcare providers, schools, legal services, employment programs, and other mainstream organizations throughout their settlement journey. So it'd be great if these systems were able to kind of continue that support for them. Second, these partnerships are important because they bring specialized expertise that we don't have and settlement organizations cannot provide on their own. And then settlement organizations cannot be experts in every sector anyway, right? So we need partners who can complement our expertise. And lastly, these partnerships, they can create a strong community support network, like safety nets for families. Rather than relying on a single organization like us, the clients can become connected to a coordinated network of organizations that can share responsibility for supporting their long-term integration and also sharing referral pathways. Having awareness in this in the region and people knowing what we do and that we're already supporting Rohingya families has helped us actually catch families when they move to our region. That way they're not ending up in crisis before we face them. So other systems like the school systems, all the clinics that see them then refer them back to us. Next slide, please. So one of the first examples we wanted to focus on was this improving access to occupational therapy services. We noticed that occupational therapists were running into two specific challenges when they were working with some of our families. First of all, they didn't have much experience with the unique needs of newcomer families, especially Rohingya families. And then they're also unfamiliar with how the interim federal health program actually worked. In practice, this meant that there was delays. There was delayed in assessments, delays in getting equipment, delays in getting home modifications. And then that kind of puts the family back, right? So instead of just working around specific cases and those barriers, we partnered with Ontario Health at Home and their contractor, CBI Health, to build something more coordinated for families. We established a dedicated occupational therapist as the primary contact for all reception house referrals, which meant that one person could actually develop real expertise in the newcomer care instead of the knowledge being scattered in thin across rotating group of providers. It also meant that clients got consistency instead of starting over with someone new every single time. And because some of the services were following them even after they left us, if this person built their expertise, they can continue providing interpretation. So to also make sure that we're following up on the referrals after, we kind of had day-to-day regular case reviews to kind of problem solve around specific cases. And sometimes, to be honest, we were letting them know ahead before sometimes when we knew families were arriving, just to kind of walk through the complex process before the family arrived and to kind of speed up the access for equipment funding and home modifications. So as a result of this process, clients accessed assessment and equipment more quickly, providers developed greater expertise working with refugee populations, and communication between organizations kind of became more coordinated. So this partnership kind of demonstrated that improving access is not just about them making referrals, it's also about trying to redesign how organizations work together so clients receive the right support at the right time. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next example we also wanted to focus on is around accessibility, especially for children. So this example is about how to adapt services and the way they're being delivered, not just improving access to them. So we noticed, again, some families that families shouldn't have had to deal with. They were repeating the same information to multiple providers over and over again. So they had an intake with us, they would have an intake with Kids Ability. Kids Ability is our region's children's treatment center. They provide rehabilitation, developmental services for kids and youth, and physical and communication, kids with physical and communication and developmental needs. So this process was kind of fragmented. They would tell us the same things, then tell Kids Ability, then go to the primary doctor and say the same things again. So instead of asking families to navigate the systems, as Reception House, Kids Ability, and some of the primary care doctors we worked with, we kind of co-developed a community intake model. So all of us would show up at the same intake and provide kind of communicate with the family, take notes together, and then also clarify each role. That way the case manager knows what their role is when it comes to following up with the families. But the primary care provider and the social workers and occupational therapists also know what their role was. So this hopefully created a more coordinated and also trauma-informed experience for families by reducing the duplication and also improving communication between providers and helping children access services earlier. So this also kind of demonstrated for us that it wasn't just about access, it was fundamentally changing how the service was being delivered, right? That way the barriers weren't affecting families and young children and families were already traumatized based on what their children had experienced in some of the camps. Next slide, please. So the final example, we wanted to focus again on the center because it goes beyond service delivery and kind of focuses on strengthening the community capacity so that in a way, we make sure that our families, when they leave our program, they have support, and the center is always able to provide one of the main issues, which is language, right? They can continue supporting that. So our evaluation showed that many Rohingya families continued to rely on the Rohingya Center after they had left our program and also other settlement services. The center had become a trusted source of interpretation, community navigation, advocacy, and cultural support. We recognize the critical role the Rohingya Center already played within the community and focus on strengthening its capacity to continue supporting families. So we used the evaluation itself to kind of advocate for increased investment for the center. We formalized our partnership with them through an MOU. That way we didn't duplicate services, providing the same service to the same community. So when they provide youth programming, we don't provide youth programming. And then we have employment program now that is focused for GARs, specifically for government-assisted refugees to overcome the barriers they face. So we provide employment support at the same time they get language classes. So that both of them work together at the same time. They don't have to leave and go to a different class and, someone else is helping them find employment. So hopefully that overcomes the barriers specifically to this group and also largely government-assisted refugees. But at the same time, the relationship was supposed to be reciprocal. So the center still shares cultural knowledge with us. They share emerging community trends. Often they're aware of what's happening on the ground in Bangladesh before us. So sometimes when they know there's mass arrivals coming, they let us know. If there's illnesses going around the camps, they let us know. Then we work with public health here to make sure that when the families arrive, we have the right support for them. They also sometimes help us anticipate secondary migration from other cities, because before families move, they're already connected to the center, they call and ask. So they also help us kind of prepare and kind of adapt our services and make sure that we proactively have the support they need when they come and land in our region. So this also demonstrates that long-term integration depends not only on like mainstream service providers or universal service providers, but it's also important to invest in community organizations like grassroots community organizations like the center, because they will continue supporting newcomers and communities and kind of mitigate the barriers that clients only have support for the first 12 to 18 months they have with us. The next slide, please. Okay, so these are kind of like some of the lessons we've been learning in how we build partnerships that work specifically for families and how we kind of stay responsive ourselves. So as we reflected on our work, there were three key lessons that emerged. So first, it's about building understanding before building partnerships. It's important that people know who our families are, the refugee experience they've had. And sometimes we all say Rohingya families, but families coming from Bangladesh are very different from families coming, for example, from Thailand or Malaysia, right? Some of families coming from Thailand have experienced imprisonment. So when we say Rohingya, we don't want it to be just a big general assumption, like they all have the same experiences. So we try to create awareness in the system, right? Even because for the first 12 to 18 months, mainstream services might not experience our clients because we're the ones working with them, accompanying them to places, providing interpretation. So we kind of provide the awareness so that they become responsive. By the time the clients reach them, they're ready. They know who's coming, right? And they have data if we can provide data. They have information if we can provide it. So that way, at least they become better prepared to adapt their services and respond before the barriers actually arise. So one of the examples we had around this is that when families started arriving, we had mass arrivals of Rohingya families. We noticed that there were some illnesses, and they weren't really major illnesses. They were still at temporary accommodation. They hadn't moved out, so they didn't have primary care. But all the walk-in clinics could not provide interpretation. They could provide it for other refugee groups because the system had responded, but not specifically for Rohingya. And because it's also an oral language, right? And there's not a lot of interpretation at the time. So we reached out to the hospital in our region. We let them know that if there's no solution to the issue, then all the clients will be ending up in the emergency room. And that would only overwhelm and overburden the system itself, right? And there was no solution. So in the end, I think by sharing this emerging issue with the hospital, we were able to actually develop a solution together. They expanded access to interpretation. They provided us with an iPad that had online interpretation that we could take with clients when they needed it to walk-in clinics, and they, in a way that improved access for clients in temporary accommodation. It kind of solved the immediate issue for them right there. And it also solved the immediate issue for the hospital because the system wasn't overburdened with issues that could have been addressed outside itself. Second, we try to build partnerships around identified needs. Every partnership we present today began with a barrier we identified through client feedback or through frontline experiences. So one of the other barriers we realize, or issue that has come up multiple times in the last 2 years with Rohingya families, is there's been family separations. So some of these issues are easy for our team to fix. They can apply for the 1-year window for families, but some of the issues are very complex and some of the families are very distressed. So we ended up being partnering with a law firm, and they were able to provide free legal support to families to kind of understand what immigration options they have, what pathways they had. And that kind of helped provide more options for them, right? Besides the 1-year window, because the 1-year window application wasn't useful to everybody, or everybody wasn't eligible for that program. The other thing we provided around that too was have a community program to come in and provide kind of like group counseling around grief and separation for family. Lastly, we also focus on strengthening partnerships through shared responsibility. Sustainable partnerships require more than referrals. They require shared ownership of outcomes, clear roles, ongoing communication, and mutual investments. So we all try to always formalize our agreements. That way we clarify our responsibilities, what shared outcomes we're all looking towards, and try to share ongoing knowledge exchanges and try to see where the capacity issues are. That way, the goal is to really create a coordinated community response that continues to support newcomers outside our program, outside our organization. Ultimately, I think for us, long-term integration cannot be achieved by settlement organizations or case management service providers alone. It requires intentional partnerships that build understanding, that actually respond to real community needs and strengthen capacity of the entire community to support newcomers. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shukri. And thank you very much to all of the presenters for your thoughtful and engaging presentations. We truly appreciate your generosity in sharing your experiences, practice, and research on working with Rohingya newcomers. And each presentation really complemented each other so beautifully and together provided us with a rich and comprehensive understanding of working with Rohingya newcomers. Thank you. Any questions? If you have any questions, you can also post them in the chat and I can read the questions and direct them to the speakers. I see the hand from Abdi Mohammed.
Hello, how are you, Tahmina?
Hello, Abdi.
Yeah, and thank you guys for the presentation. I must say they were very, very powerful presentations. Thank you so much. Tahmina, if you'll allow me, I have two questions. My first question will go to Amelia from University of Western Ontario. I want to ask, what is the correlation between prolonged displacement, adjustment challenges, and the psychosocial resilience of the Rohingya people in the settlement phase? And my second question will go to Bree from Wilfred Laurier. And one of her findings was, number 3 was gendered and intergenerational consequences of adversity. Interested to understand, how does statelessness produce intergenerational adversity among the Rohingya? Is it a cause-effect relationship or is it entirely coincidental? Thank you.
Thank you, Abdi.
Hi, Abdi. I cut out partway through your question. I heard that you had a question, I think, about the psychosocial adjustments.
Yes, so my question was, I wanted to know what is the correlation between prolonged displacement, adjustment challenges, and the psychosocial resilience of the Rohingya people in the settlement phase. Thank
So
you.
I don't know if I can address that directly because it didn't come up in a lot of our conversations, how they are adjusting. But there was a lot of obstacles. So for example, the employment. So because they didn't have a lot of experience while they were in the camps prolonged, that was impacting their employment abilities. They felt like they weren't really getting the skills that they required while they were spending all this time in the camp and were not allowed to have jobs, as well as the educational gaps for their children. So I think if I were to extrapolate that, their desire to provide for their families and their desire to provide opportunities to their children were two of the things that came out, as extremely important for these men. And both of those things were impacted substantially by their time spent in the camps.
Should I go next about so the intergenerational relationship. Yeah, I think I grouped it with the gendered consequences of adversity because I think that there's, at least what we're seeing is how through the generations they're passing down this system of, the girls are taking care, doing the home tasks. They're being kept inside the home due to cultural reasons, but also due to the situation of how the camp is set up and how there is safety issues with violence in the camps. So the girls are kept inside. And there's also the element of purda, which is the cultural practice of keeping the women inside the home. in Myanmar, for those of you who are familiar with the living situation in Myanmar, the Rohingya families would live in these kinds of compounds and in these places where the women could be outside the home, but they were within a compound, so they were kind of within the constraints of the culture, but also they were still able to be outside. But that doesn't play out in the camps because of the overcrowding. So that those kinds of intergenerational gendered elements I combine together because I think we're seeing it passed down to the children, to the girls. The girls are the ones taking care of the younger children. They're the ones doing a lot of the housework, and they're the ones that are the first to be pulled from school. So that's kind of the intergenerational consequences. So I can't say cause and effect. I mean, none of the research that we do can do that, but I think that there's relationships that we're seeing played out through the generations of these families.
Thank you, Bree.
Takmina, there are questions in the Q&A if you want to take a look.
Yes, yeah. Let me also read in the Q&A section, there are a few questions. Bree, this question is also for you. Your comment about the importance of appropriate housing for Rohingya was very impactful. Can you please elaborate what it means in practice?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I was trying to connect it again to the situation in the camps where families don't have a choice in where they're living. The only choice they can, I mean, there's very little mobility for a family if they're unhappy in their community to be able to change sites. The only place that families can perhaps maybe go to would be Basan Char, which is an island in the middle of the ocean where nobody really wants to go because it's isolated and there's a lot of rumors and uncertainty about it. So I was trying to connect it to the situation of Rohingya here in Canada and that importance of having some sort of sense of agency in order to choose where one wants to be. So I think that policies should really consider how communities will want to connect with other people from their community. So we're talking about Waterloo, for example, or London having these Rohingya communities. That's where other Rohingya want to resettle. But if we have policies that say, oh, you have to go to a certain province, I think that's very challenging for families. And I think we're going to see lots of secondary displacement once people are in Canada, which can be stressful for families. And they're not able to put down those roots that they want in the communities that they want. So it's listening to families talk about what they want in a home, what they want in a place to live, and what they want to see for their future, I think is really important.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you. Let me read another question. So this question is for the practitioners. Our organization builds the knowledge and skills of providers to support the mental health of immigrants and refugees. What are some topics we can focus on to help providers better support the mental health of Rohingya refugees? Mohammed Shukri, if you want to share, please, Mohammed.
Yeah, through the work that we have, Professor Jason and his colleagues have done, we have seen there are areas where, as a resource center, we could bring the expertise that we were involved with in the past. And we have established a very strong relationship with an art therapist and a trauma and violence care mental health expert. And those activities were directly linked to or incorporated within the programs and services that we have been doing. And the response was really encouraging. And we seen that when Rohingya families come together, they feel comfortable sharing, information and one thing that I've attended a few of the sessions, and you see them actively involved. They have a sense of humor. They, they smile, they laugh, and unlike previous or to compare roughly with our experience with other groups who have experienced severe displacement in the past, like the Yazidis, etc. We have not seen much of individuals being were in our center. We had to call ambulances to see, and we were mindful about putting a social worker in the programs as well. We tried to see how engaging they are, for example, in attending the indigenous sessions that we offer quite frequently in our center. And the indigenous uh, storyteller, when she was talking about, how the indigenous or the when they were in the schools, they were treated in a manner, that, for example, in the winter, they used to uh, make these students take bath, showers, cold water, and the person, the social worker, who was present in the session, was surprised. She commented, that they were very interested in learning a lot, but they just stopped silent, thinking how, because they have experienced the winter in Canada, and see kind of questioning why they have been subjected to such severe conditions. And that reflected their resilience and support and questioning, this is not fair that they have been through. Um, uh, and they brought some of their experiences, And when they talk about their experiences, especially the youth uh, and others who are in the room, they used to share with confidence and they used to laugh, remembering, bringing reminiscence, memories of their past when they were in refugee camps. And, it's the whole sense of having uh, individuals or the Rohingyas to come together and share information while they are together. I think that's gives them a sense of safety and belonging. And we made sure that we don't move them quickly and integrate in the community and attend other programs and services unless they feel like. So they quite number of times they used to say, we want our culture to be protected. We want to be together. And being together, they feel more safe and overcoming some of the difficulties that they have endured in the past.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm checking the time. It's 2:28. We have a couple of more minutes. Shukri, do you want to add? I also saw your hand.
Yes, I was just gonna at first we realized with mental health, it's better if it starts early on. So at the hotel, we have a community partner that comes in and provides well-being orientations. And then we also rely on primary care to kind of have that discussion because sometimes the way families experience mental health, the way they describe it most of the time, it sounds like physical health. So to overcome those kind of mental health stigmas, things like that, we normally rely on primary care to kind of then assess and then talk to the families about the options they have, and then the case managers can support them throughout. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shukri. I know it's 2:29 and I know there are a few other questions, but we also have to end our session. Victoria, we end at 2:30, right?
I think you could take one or two more questions.
Okay, that's okay to take more. Okay, wonderful. I also see some hands. Kabir, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. I actually learned a lot of information from today's sessions, and I'm a Rohingya speaking individuals working with settlement and community support organizations. There is a lot of issues. I work from British Columbia, so housing is big issue here, as well as the government funding they get. I believe after housing, they left with like a couple of $100. But my questions to all of you is that now here I can see there is a growing adult, like in 20s. A lot of young adult from a Rohingya community, and they are looking for a job, how to settle down. Now the problem is, if I'm a kid, my kid comes to me, look for a suggestion, guidance. For their parents and them, there is no difference. They don't understand anything. They don't know about Canada, what to do, how to do. And these people doesn't have any guidance, and they have lack of communication skills too. Now, how do you recommend we should support them in terms of getting job, guidelining? Because if we don't guide these young people now, they will be derailed and get into some sort of crime. We don't know. So what do you recommend how we can actually handle this?
Thank you, Kabir. Mohammed, Shukri, Bree, Jason, anyone would like to take on this question?
Kabir, I think Shukri has more experience with regard to almost more than a decade, almost two decades working with the Rohingyas. However, with our short time period since 2023, the group that we worked with, they were persistent in getting jobs in order to meet the high demand of rents, etc. And we were able to connect some of them to employment services, and having a specific case worker working with those folks through their journey as they settle in their new country. They are not gonna continue the life that they had in the past, and start here in Canada from where they ended, but they are starting a new life. So, having that in mind, it's better to take them under your arms and making sure that somebody is able to create a roadmap for them based on their assets, based on their skills, based on the connections they have, their family size, etc. So I think Shukri, we'll need to connect soon, hopefully, and we'll learn a lot through as we continue serving our families.
Yeah.
We try to
I'll
put
just
this
say,
picture,
yeah.
the 360-degree support, making sure that they are supported in all aspects of their life, the multitude of supports that. But Kabir has mentioned, the most, it's a timely question. Yeah.
I think we face the same challenges when it comes to youth trying to find them employment. The other thing is, for our caseload, specifically when we looked at it, it's a very young caseload. The average age is 21, right? And so it's mostly youth and children. So we face the same issues, especially the age between 18 to 21, because they're older than high school, right? They don't want to go to high school, but they also still don't have the language skills, and they don't have any maybe work experiences. So I think we've been trying to find ways to work through that with the center. But if there's no way to incentivize youth to pick up the language, to provide them with some income, right? We kind of fail them because they have no options. So I think for us right now, specifically for our organization, there's been some change. We finally got some funding to provide the programming specifically for people like the Rohingya families who have some limited English, maybe no work experiences. That way we can combine actual employment support and employment with language with language support, because we did run a very successful pilot with IRCC that provided employment and actual language support in the workplace for the Syrians, and it worked really well. So we're hoping to kind of replicate that again now. So we'll see how that goes. We'll try it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed and Shukri. Let me take the last question, and my apologies as we cannot take all of the questions. I'm reading it from the chat. Karina Dick is sharing. As settlement workers in schools, what are the recommended resources for translation and interpretation for the Rohingya language? Perhaps the question to the practitioners.
I think that's our first experience with the schools and families. They really want to connect to the school system, and having Swiss workers in the schools has been the main important. There are a few issues that we can talk for a little bit longer time, but due to the constraints of time, I know Vicky's want to say, that's a so we could talk about this with the person who asked the question, and we can share our expertise on this with the issues that the Rohingya kids are facing in the school, and also how the families needs to be engaged in the school system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I also see in the chat there are also excellent resources which were shared. Yujang shared the resource, a booklet, YouTube video. And Bree also shared the link to the research group of what type of research they're doing. I encourage you to check these resources, and Shukri also shared the website of Rohingya Center of Canada, which is located in the Waterloo region. And thank you very much, everyone. We are so grateful for everyone who came. There will be more Pathway to Prosperity workshops coming up, and you can join the P2P newsletter if you're already not on it to get updates. And you can also go to P2P website and look to other events in the next workshops. Thank you, everyone, for all your attendance and your participation. Victoria, would you like to add something?
Just thank you, everybody. And maybe we'll share the presenters with their permission email addresses if people have questions or want to contact you in some way.
Just
Fantastic. So there'll be more conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for attending today, and have a nice day.